The Hegemony battlecruiser Eternal Dominion hung in the void like a metal predator, its hull scarred by 1,000 conquests. On the bridge, Commander Thex studied the holographic display with the satisfied expression of a carnivore spotting wounded prey. His 4 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry across his elongated skull, gleamed with anticipation. Tactical Officer Grom. Thex's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to entire civilizations surrendering at his word. Confirm what our sensors are telling us. Grom's chitinous fingers danced across his console, data streaming across multiple screens. Sir, long-range surveillance confirms a single facility on the 3rd moon of the Terran colony system. Minimal defensive signatures. No orbital platforms, no patrol craft, no energy shields. He paused, mandibles clicking with what passed for hegemony amusement. It appears to be a nursery, Commander. A nursery. Thex savored the word like fine wine. In his 3 decades of conquest, he'd learned that humans were peculiarly protective of their young, more so than most species. It made them predictable. It made them vulnerable. The main viewer flickered to life, displaying feeds from their stealth reconnaissance drones. What they showed was almost too perfect to believe. A pastoral facility nestled in rolling green hills, surrounded by gardens where tiny human figures played among colorful flowers. Children, actual human cubs, ran laughing through sprinkler systems, their delighted shrieks carrying across the monitoring equipment. "Analysis! Intelligence Officer Silra," Thex commanded, never taking his eyes off the display. Silra's silver-scaled head tilted as she processed data streams. Approximately 30 to 40 human juveniles, ages ranging from 4 to 10 standard years. Caretaker staff appears to consist of elderly humans. Retirement age by their species standards. Her voice carried the clinical detachment of someone who'd analyzed the destruction of countless worlds. Defensive capabilities appear negligible. The facility seems designed for comfort rather than security. On the screen, an elderly human male moved slowly between garden beds, tending to tomato plants with the careful attention of someone who had all the time in the world. His gray hair caught the afternoon sunlight, and his movements held the gentle precision of a man who found genuine joy in nurturing growing things. This was Walter, though the aliens had no way of knowing his name, or anything else about him for that matter. "Look at him," Grom chuckled, a sound like grinding metal. "Probably takes him 10 minutes just to stand up from his gardening." The feed switched to interior surveillance. In a sunny cafeteria, a plump human female with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun was setting out what appeared to be freshly baked cookies. Steam rose from the golden-brown treats as she arranged them on colorful plates. This was Mildred, humming softly to herself as she worked, completely unaware that alien eyes were cataloging her every movement. "Domestic staff," Silra noted, with dismissive certainty. "Cooking, cleaning, basic childcare. Standard retirement colony assignments for aging humans who lack the reflexes for more demanding work." The camera angle shifted to a cozy dormitory, where small beds were arranged in neat rows, each decorated with stuffed animals and personal belongings. Several human children were already settling in for what appeared to be afternoon nap time. A gentle-looking woman with kind eyes, Vera, moved between the beds, tucking blankets around tiny forms and whispering what were presumably bedtime stories. Thex's primary heart rate increased. This was exactly the sort of target that would bring humanity to its knees fastest. Not their military installations, not their industrial centers, their children. The one thing that could make the notoriously stubborn human leadership negotiate. "Sir," Grom's voice carried a note of eager bloodlust. Recommend immediate deployment of a standard occupation force. Resistance should be minimal, perhaps non-existent. Minimal? Thex actually laughed, a barking sound that echoed off the bridge walls. Grom, my dear tactical officer, I believe you're being generous. What resistance could there possibly be? A few geriatric humans armed with… what? Garden tools and cookie sheets? The bridge crew joined their commander's amusement. The idea was genuinely funny to them. Hardened warriors of the Hegemony, conquerors of star systems, reduced to occupying what amounted to a human daycare center, staffed by beings old enough to be their great-grandparents. On screen, Walter had finished his gardening and was now sitting on a wooden bench, sharing what appeared to be crackers with a small group of children who'd gathered around him. The scene was so wholesome, it was almost nauseating to the Hegemony observers. The old man pointed to various birds in nearby trees, apparently teaching the young ones about local wildlife. His weathered face creased with genuine warmth. Standard occupation protocols seem excessive, Silra observed, studying her data feeds. Perhaps a single landing craft? Minimal force projection should suffice for a facility of this nature. Agreed, Thex nodded. We're not conquering a fortress. We're collecting children and their babysitters. Deploy landing craft Omega with a standard pacification team. 12 soldiers should be more than adequate. He paused, considering. Make it 8. We wouldn't want to traumatize the little ones unnecessarily. The irony was lost on none of them. The mighty Hegemony, scourge of the Outer Rim, deploying its smallest possible force because they were worried about frightening human toddlers. Below on the moon's surface, the children were indeed settling in for their afternoon rest period. In the dormitory, Vera finished her rounds and dimmed the lights to a soft, ember glow. Through the windows, Walter could be seen putting away his gardening tools in a small shed, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone following a routine established over years. In the kitchen, Mildred was cleaning up after the cookie baking session, occasionally sampling her work with the critical eye of someone who took pride in her craft. The facility hummed with the quiet contentment of a place where everything happened according to schedule, where the most exciting event of the day might be whether the cookies turned out extra crispy, or if someone would spot a particularly interesting butterfly in the garden. Omega Team, Thex activated the ship's communication system. Prepare for deployment. Target is a human childcare facility. Expect 0 resistance. Your mission is simple. Secure the facility, detain all occupants, and establish a communication link with Earth Command. This should be the easiest assignment of your careers. Through the ship's hull, the smaller craft detached with barely a vibration. Aboard landing craft Omega, Ground Assault Team Leader Drac reviewed his mission parameters with the bored efficiency of someone asked to swat a particularly slow insect. Remember, he addressed his squad, these are human cubs we're collecting. Minimal force, maximum intimidation. The elderly staff will likely surrender immediately once they understand the situation. He checked his weapon settings, adjusting them to their lowest non-lethal configuration. Try not to break anything unnecessarily. We want the children calm when we begin negotiations with their government. The landing craft's descent was smooth and unopposed. No surface-to-air batteries opened fire. No fighter craft scrambled to intercept. The facility's communication array didn't even attempt to send a distress signal. Probably because, Drac reasoned, the old humans hadn't noticed their approach yet. As they entered the moon's atmosphere, Drac could see the facility spread out below them like a peaceful painting. Children played in a fenced playground area, while their elderly guardians watched from shaded benches. A few looked up at the descending craft with what appeared to be mild curiosity rather than alarm, as if alien invasion was merely an interesting variation in their otherwise predictable daily routine. "Easiest mission in Hegemony history," muttered one of Drax's soldiers, checking his restraint equipment. "Makes you wonder why Command even bothered sending us." A single diplomatic envoy could have walked in and asked nicely. "Because," Drax replied with the wisdom of someone who'd participated in dozens of conquests, "humans are notorious for their emotional responses to threats against their young. Better to have overwhelming force available, even if we don't need to use it." Overwhelming force. 8 soldiers against 30 children, and a handful of retirement-age caretakers. The phrase would have been laughable if any of them had bothered to think about it. But they didn't think about it. They had no reason to. After all, what could possibly go wrong when dealing with human cubs and the elderly humans who cared for them? What possible threat could be posed by beings whose most strenuous daily activity appeared to be watering plants and baking cookies? As landing craft Omega settled onto the facility's designated landing pad, because of course the humans had built a landing pad, probably for supply deliveries, Drax noticed that their arrival had attracted a small audience. Several children pressed against the playground fence, pointing excitedly at the craft. An elderly man who'd been reading on a nearby bench looked up with what seemed like polite interest. Not fear, not alarm, just interest. "Sir," one of his soldiers observed, "they don't seem particularly concerned about our arrival." "Why should they be?" Drax replied, activating the craft's exit protocols. "They probably think we're supply delivery or maintenance personnel. These retirement-age humans likely haven't seen real military action in decades. To them, we're just an unusual interruption to nap time." The craft's boarding ramp descended with a soft hiss of hydraulics. Outside, the facility continued its peaceful afternoon routine, completely unaware that their quiet day was about to become significantly more interesting. At least, that's what the Hegemony forces believed. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Walter had set down his book the moment their craft appeared on sensors, and that the polite interest in his expression was actually the look of a man calculating optimal firing positions and escape routes. What they didn't know was that Mildred had already sent a coded signal through what appeared to be a routine kitchen inventory request, alerting certain interested parties that unexpected guests had arrived. What they especially didn't know was that the retirement-age humans caring for these children had volunteered for this assignment specifically because they were the only ones qualified to handle what was about to happen next. But they would learn soon enough. Ground Assault Team Leader Drax stepped onto human soil with the swagger of someone who'd never met meaningful resistance. His squad followed in standard formation, if you could call their casual stroll a formation. After all, when your opposition consists of senior citizens and toddlers, military precision seems somewhat excessive. The facility was even more quaint up close. Flower boxes lined the walkways, filled with cheerful blooms that bobbed in the gentle breeze. A hand-painted sign near the entrance read, "Welcome, friends," in bright, childish letters, decorated with handprints in every color of the rainbow. Someone had drawn a smiling sun in the corner, complete with oversized eyelashes. "Adorable," muttered one of Drax's soldiers, shouldering his plasma rifle. "Almost makes you feel bad about what we're here to do." "Focus," Drax replied, though he had to admit the place had a certain charm. "Remember, we want the children calm and the staff compliant. This should be as simple as announcing our presence and explaining the situation." Through the facility's large windows, they could see the normal rhythm of human domestic life. In what appeared to be an art room, several children sat at low tables, earnestly working with finger paints and construction paper. Their small tongues poked out in concentration as they created masterpieces that would have made hegemony military intelligence weep with their complete lack of tactical significance. Mildred appeared in the kitchen window, apparently oblivious to the armed aliens approaching her workplace. She was kneading bread dough with the methodical patience of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. Flour dusted her apron, and she paused occasionally to push a strand of silver hair out of her eyes with the back of her wrist. "Target the elderly female first," Drac instructed his team. "She appears to be the primary caregiver. Once we have her secured, the others should cooperate without resistance." They approached the main entrance, a cheerful blue door with a brass knocker shaped like a friendly dolphin. Drac reached for the handle and found it unlocked. Of course, it was unlocked. What did a retirement home nursery have to fear on a peaceful colony moon? The door opened with a soft chime, the kind of pleasant sound designed to alert staff that someone had entered without startling sleeping children. Immediately, the sense of fresh-baked bread and finger paint filled their nostrils, domestic smells that spoke of routine and safety, and absolutely nothing that should concern elite hegemony soldiers. "Hello there!" The voice came from their right, where Walter had emerged from what appeared to be a maintenance closet, a toolbox in one weathered hand and a warm smile on his face. His work clothes were clean but well worn, and he moved with the careful, economical motions of someone whose joints weren't quite what they used to be. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Walter asked, setting down his toolbox and approaching them with the unhurried friendliness of someone greeting expected visitors. "I'm afraid we weren't expecting anyone today, but you're certainly welcome." Drac blinked. In 30 campaigns across 20 star systems, he'd never encountered a reaction quite like this. Usually, when the hegemony arrived, there was screaming, running, desperate attempts at resistance or negotiation. This elderly human was treating them like door-to-door salesmen. "You are now under the authority of the hegemony," Drac announced, raising his weapon to a more visible position. "This facility has been selected for occupation. You will gather all inhabitants in the main common area for processing." Walter nodded thoughtfully, as if Drac had asked him to adjust the thermostat. "I see. Well, that's certainly unexpected." He glanced at his watch, an actual mechanical timepiece that ticked audibly in the sudden silence. "The children are just finishing their art projects. Would it be all right if they completed them first? You know how disappointed they get when they can't finish what they've started." One of Drac's soldiers leaned close to whisper, "Sir, I think the old human doesn't understand the situation." "We are an occupying force," Drac repeated, louder this time. "You are now prisoners. This is not a request, it is a command." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Walter replied with that same pleasant smile. "I was just hoping we could work around nap time. The little ones get cranky when their schedule is disrupted." From deeper in the facility came the sound of children's laughter and the soft murmur of adult voices maintaining order. In the kitchen, they could see Mildred continuing her bread-making, occasionally glancing toward the entrance with what appeared to be mild curiosity rather than alarm. Drac felt the first stirring of unease. This wasn't how conquests were supposed to proceed. Where was the fear, the desperate bargaining, the tearful pleas for mercy? These humans were acting like his armed squad was a minor inconvenience rather than an existential threat. "Secure the kitchen staff," he ordered 2 of his soldiers. "I'll handle this one." The soldiers moved toward the kitchen, their boots clicking on the polished floor. Mildred looked up as they approached, flour still coating her hands, and smiled the same warm welcome Walter had offered. "Oh my, she said, studying their weapons and armor with the clinical interest of someone examining a new recipe. "You boys look like you could use a good meal. When was the last time you had home cooking?" "Ma'am," one of the soldiers began, clearly struggling with how to proceed. "You need to stop what you're doing and come with us." "Of course, dear," Mildred replied, washing her hands at the sink. "Just let me get this bread in the oven first. It'll be ruined if I don't, and we can't have that." She turned to face them, drying her hands on a cheerful yellow towel. "You know, I haven't seen uniforms quite like yours before. Are you from the new security company they hired?" The soldier looked to his partner, who shrugged helplessly. Neither had trained for this scenario. Meanwhile, Drac was having his own difficulties with Walter, who had somehow managed to turn their conversation into a discussion of the facility's plumbing issues. "And the pipes in the East Wing have been making the most peculiar noise," Walter was saying, apparently oblivious to the plasma rifle pointed at his chest. "I think it might be air in the lines, but I'm not entirely certain. You wouldn't happen to have any experience with plumbing, would you?" "Stop talking," Drac commanded. "Gather the children immediately, or we will gather them ourselves." "Well, if you insist," Walter sighed, the way someone might when asked to interrupt their favorite television program. "Though I should warn you, some of them are still nap time. Waking children prematurely can be challenging." He moved toward the dormitory with that same unhurried pace, and Drac found himself following, increasingly bewildered by the entire situation. Through the dormitory's open door, they could see rows of small beds, most occupied by sleeping children. The room was dim and peaceful, with soft music playing from hidden speakers. At the room's far end, Vera sat in a rocking chair, reading quietly while keeping watch over her charges. She looked up as they entered, taking in the armed aliens with the same calm assessment the others had shown. "Afternoon, Walter," she said softly. "These gentlemen here about the heating system?" "Not exactly," Walter replied in the same hushed tone one uses around sleeping children. "They're here about, well, it's a bit complicated. Something about occupation and processing." "Ah," Vera nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Should I wake the children?" "They seem to think it's necessary." Drac felt reality slipping sideways. This was insane. These people were treating a hostile military occupation like a scheduling conflict. He stepped forward, intending to take control of the situation, and immediately understood Walter's warning about waking children prematurely. One of the sleeping forms stirred at the sound of his heavy boots. A small girl, perhaps 6 years old, sat up in her bed, rubbing her eyes and looking around with the confused irritation of someone pulled from deep sleep. Her hair stuck up at odd angles, and she clutched a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. "Vera," the child mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "What's happening? Who are those people?" "It's all right, Mia," Vera said soothingly, rising from her chair. "These are visitors. They need to speak with everyone." More children were beginning to wake, disturbed by the voices and movement. A boy slightly older than the girl sat up in the next bed over, instantly alert in the way children can be when they sense adults are tense about something. "Are we in trouble?" he asked, and there was something in his tone, a sharpness that didn't quite match his apparent age. "No trouble, Sam," Walter assured him. "Just some unexpected company." Drac watched this domestic scene with growing frustration. His soldiers were scattered throughout the facility, presumably having similar difficulties with the other staff members. The mission was proceeding, technically, but nothing was happening the way it should. The humans were cooperating, but in a way that somehow made him feel like he was the one being managed. "All of you, main common area, now," he commanded, raising his voice despite the sleeping children. "This is not a negotiation." Several more children sat up at his sharp tone, and their expressions— there was something there, something that flickered behind their eyes for just a moment before they resumed looking like sleepy, confused kids. "Of course," Walter said agreeably. "Vera, would you mind gathering the little ones? I'll collect the others from the art room." As the human adults began the process of rousing and organizing the children, Drac activated his comm unit to check on his squad's progress. "Team 2, report." "Sir," came the crackling response, "we've secured the kitchen staff and, sir, you need to see this." "See what?" "The kitchen, sir. Well, it's not exactly what we expected." Drac frowned. What could possibly be unexpected about an elderly woman's kitchen in a childcare facility? "Elaborate." "Hard to explain, sir. Maybe you should come take a look." Before Drac could respond, Walter had returned with a small group of children from the art room, their hands still stained with paint, chattering quietly among themselves. They looked at the armed aliens with the frank curiosity children show toward anything new and interesting. But there was something else there, too, a quality of attention that seemed unusual for their apparent ages. "All right, everyone," Walter announced gently. "Let's all gather in the main room. Our visitors have something they'd like to discuss with us." The children filed out obediently, though Drac noticed they moved in a pattern that seemed almost too organized for a group of sleepy kids being herded by elderly caretakers. They arranged themselves in the common area's comfortable seating, with a efficiency that bordered on military precision, though it was subtle enough that it might have been coincidence. Might have been. "Team 2, Drac tried his comm again. "What exactly am I going to find in that kitchen?" The response was delayed, filled with the kind of pause that usually preceded very bad news. "Sir," his soldier's voice was carefully controlled, "I think we may need to reassess our intelligence regarding this facility." In the common area, surrounded by children with paint-stained fingers and elderly humans who treated armed occupation like a minor social inconvenience, Drac began to suspect that his easy assignment was about to become significantly more complicated. He just wasn't sure why yet. Drac made his way to the kitchen with the deliberate stride of someone trying to maintain authority, while everything around him spiraled into the surreal. What he found there made him question whether he'd been breathing hallucinogenic gas since landing. The kitchen looked normal enough at first glance. Cheerful yellow walls, industrial-grade appliances suitable for feeding 30 children, and the lingering aroma of Mildred's fresh bread. But his soldiers were standing frozen near what appeared to be a spice rack, staring at it with the expressions of people who'd just discovered their grandmother was secretly a weapons dealer. "Show me," Drac commanded. One of his soldiers, a veteran of 15 campaigns who'd never shown fear in his life, reached toward what looked like an ordinary jar labeled oregano. He twisted it counterclockwise, and the entire spice rack swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a compartment that definitely hadn't been included in any childcare facility blueprints. Inside was enough military-grade equipment to outfit a small army. Plasma charges arranged in neat rows, tactical explosives with Hegemony serial numbers, meaning they'd been acquired from previous battles. Communication jammers, something that looked suspiciously like a portable shield generator, and weapons. Lots of weapons. "Ma'am," Drac turned to Mildred, who was calmly removing her bread from the oven, as if armed aliens discovering her secret arsenal was a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon occurrence. "Would you care to explain this?" Mildred set the loaves on cooling racks, with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. The bread's golden crust gleamed in the kitchen lighting, and she smiled with genuine pride at her handiwork. "Oh, that old thing?" she said, glancing at the weapons cache like it was a minor kitchen inconvenience. "Walter installed that ages ago. You know how men are with their projects, always building secret compartments and hiding things. I keep asking him to put in more storage for my baking supplies instead." "These are military weapons," Drax stated, his voice climbing despite his efforts at control. "Are they?" Mildred examined the arsenal with polite interest. "I wouldn't know, dear. I just use that space to store the children's emergency supplies. You know how kids are, always scraping knees and getting into trouble. Better to be prepared." She said this while standing next to enough firepower to level a city block. Drax's comm unit crackled to life. "Sir, Team 3 reporting from the maintenance areas. You need to get down here, now." The basement of a children's facility, Drax reasoned, should contain things like laundry equipment, spare furniture, and possibly a few boxes of art supplies. It should not contain what he found when he descended the cheerfully painted stairs. The basement had been converted into something that looked like a cross between a command center and a gymnasium. Multiple computer terminals lined one wall, their screens displaying what appeared to be tactical readouts and surveillance feeds from across the sector. The opposite wall was equipped with training equipment that definitely hadn't come from any civilian supplier. But it was the third wall that made Drax's blood run cold. Awards, commendations, military decorations from campaigns spanning decades, and photographs, dozens of them, showing the facility's elderly caretakers in various military uniforms, standing next to smoking ruins that Drax recognized as former Hegemony strongholds. There was Walter, 30 years younger, wearing the insignia of a human Special Forces commander. Next to him stood Mildred, though in the photo she was labeled as Demolitions, Specialist M. Garrison, and was holding what appeared to be the severed head of a Hegemony battle mech. "Sir," one of his soldiers whispered, studying a particular photograph, "isn't that the Kepler Station assault? The one where we lost an entire fleet?" Drax examined the image. It showed a group of human commandos standing in front of a burning space station that he now realized with growing horror was indeed Kepler Station. The same operation that had been classified as a catastrophic system failure in official Hegemony records. At the center of the group, grinning with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just pulled off the impossible, was a younger version of the kindly old man who'd been asking about his plumbing experience upstairs. "Team 4, Drax's voice had gone hoarse. "Status report." "Sir, we've moved the children to the common area as ordered, but..." "But what?" "Well, sir, they're not exactly acting like children anymore." Drax took the stairs 3 at a time, his squad close behind. What he found in the common area challenged every assumption he'd made about human development, child psychology, and the basic nature of reality itself. The 30 children who had been finger-painting and napping 20 minutes ago were now arranged in perfect military formation. The paint stains were gone from their hands, apparently cleaned off with the kind of efficiency that spoke of extensive practice. Their posture was ramrod straight, their eyes alert and focused, and they were studying the Hegemony soldiers with the clinical assessment of experienced tacticians. Sam, the boy who'd asked if they were in trouble, stepped forward with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Gentlemen," he said, and his voice carried an authority that made Drax's trained soldiers unconsciously straighten, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "Your children," Drax stated, though even as he said it, he could hear how ridiculous it sounded. "We are," Sam agreed pleasantly. We're also the third generation of humanity's tactical response program. Our parents were rather disappointed when the Hegemony stopped providing adequate training opportunities, so they decided to supplement our education. Mia, the 6-year-old who'd been clutching a stuffed rabbit, was now examining one of the Hegemony weapons with professional interest. "Standard plasma rifle," she observed, her voice carrying the casual expertise of someone who'd been around military equipment her entire life. "Third-generation design, if I'm not mistaken. We used to have several of these in our practice range." "Practice range?" Drax's voice cracked. "Oh, yes," another child chimed in cheerfully. "Grandpa Walter built it in Sub-Basement 3, right next to Grandma Mildred's demolitions workshop." Drax felt reality crumbling around him like a poorly constructed building. "This is impossible. Your children, human children, don't—" "You can't?" "Can't what?" Sam asked, with genuine curiosity. "Learn? Adapt? Grow up in a universe where peaceful childhood is a luxury most species can't afford?" His expression remained perfectly pleasant, but there was something in his eyes that made several of Drax's soldiers take involuntary steps backward. From the kitchen came the sound of Mildred humming again, apparently back to her bread-making. Through the windows, they could see Walter resuming his gardening, moving among the flower beds with the same unhurried care he'd shown before their arrival. "The facility's defensive systems are online," announced Zoe, consulting what appeared to be a child's toy tablet, but was apparently something considerably more sophisticated. "Perimeter secured, communications blocked, and—" She paused, studying her readings. "Oh dear, it looks like your friends upstairs are having some difficulties." "What friends?" Drax demanded, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "The ones on your ship," Mia replied helpfully. "Grandpa Walter sent them a dinner invitation while you were downstairs. I think Grandma Mildred is planning something special." Drax's comm unit erupted in panicked chatter. Voices from the Eternal Dominion, all talking at once, reports of systems failures and unexpected power outages, and something about the entire kitchen staff requesting permission to come aboard to prepare a proper welcome meal for our guests. "Commander Thex here," came the increasingly frantic voice of his superior. "Drax, what is your status? Our sensors are showing massive energy readings from your location, and somehow civilian craft are approaching our position with what appears to be— Are those cooking supplies?" In the common area, the children had begun moving with the fluid coordination of a unit that had trained together for years. Not the chaotic energy of kids at play, but the purposeful efficiency of soldiers preparing for operation. "You see," Sam explained conversationally while the other children arranged themselves into tactical positions with the casual ease of long practice, "the thing about humans is that we don't really have non-combatants. We have people who aren't currently fighting and people who are too young to fight effectively yet. But defenseless?" He shook his head with the patient expression of someone explaining something very simple to someone very slow. "That's not really a concept we understand." Walter appeared in the doorway, no longer moving with the careful steps of an elderly caretaker. His posture was straight, his movements precise, and there was something in his eyes that explained why Hegemony battle commanders had learned to fear humans in the first place. "Children," he said gently, "I think it's time for advanced lessons to begin." From the kitchen came Mildred's voice, still cheerful, but now carrying undertones that made Drax's combat-trained instincts scream warnings. "Walter, dear, should I prepare the usual welcome for our guests? Friends upstairs." "I think that would be appropriate," Walter replied. "After all, they came such a long way to visit." Drax's comm unit was now broadcasting what sounded like barely controlled panic from the Eternal Dominion. Something about civilian shuttles moving with impossible coordination, about elderly humans who shouldn't have been able to operate military-grade equipment, and about a very polite request to discuss hospitality protocols that had somehow resulted in complete communication blackouts across half the ship. "This isn't possible," Drac whispered, staring at 30 children who were now clearly demonstrating why humanity's enemies had learned to fear even their youngest generations. "Isn't it?" Sam asked, tilting his head with the expression of someone genuinely puzzled by the confusion. "Did you really think we'd leave our children undefended? Did you imagine we'd trust their safety to anyone less capable than our very best?" The truth hit Drac like a plasma blast to the chest. This wasn't a nursery protected by elderly caretakers. This was humanity's most elite training facility, staffed by their greatest living warriors, producing the next generation of the beings that had made the Hegemony learn to fear the night. And they'd just walked directly into it, expecting easy prey. In the kitchen, Mildred was humming what sounded like an old human battle song. Outside, Walter was probably doing something that would shortly make the Eternal Dominion very unhappy. And 30 human children who'd been finger-painting an hour ago were now looking at them with the professional interest of apex predators who'd just been presented with particularly entertaining prey. "So," Sam said with the polite tone of someone opening negotiations, "shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Or would you prefer to continue with your original plan?" Drac looked around the room, at children who weren't children, caretakers who weren't caretakers, and a facility that was definitely not what any of them had thought it was. For the first time in his military career, Ground Assault Team Leader Drac seriously considered the possibility that he was in way over his head. The surrender negotiations lasted approximately 15 seconds, which was 14 seconds longer than anyone had expected. "I think," Drac said carefully, "we may have made a tactical error." "Oh, you think?" Mia asked with the devastating innocence only a 6-year-old could manage, while simultaneously field-stripping a plasma rifle. "What gave it away? Was it the hidden weapons cache? Or the part where Grandpa Walter's hobby turns out to be collecting Hegemony battleships?" Through the facility's windows, they could see the first explosions blooming like deadly flowers around the Eternal Dominion. Walter had apparently finished his gardening and moved on to more aggressive landscaping projects. Each blast was precisely calculated, not to destroy the ship, but to disable specific systems in a sequence that would leave the crew alive, but very unhappy. "Sir," Drac's comm unit crackled, with the voice of someone having a very bad day. "This is Commander Thex. I don't suppose you'd care to explain why our defenseless target is currently demonstrating advanced knowledge of our ship's structural weaknesses." Before Drac could respond, Sam had appropriated the communication device with the casual efficiency of someone borrowing a pencil. "Commander Thex, this is Training Facility Designation Whisper. You're speaking with Sam, current operational leader of Class Theta 9. We'd like to thank you for this unexpected training exercise." "Training exercise?" Thex's voice climbed several octaves. "Oh, yes," Sam replied cheerfully. "It's been ages since we had live opponents for our tactical simulations. Most educational. The children have learned quite a lot about Hegemony operational protocols, equipment specifications, and—" He paused, consulting his tablet. "Psychological breaking points." More explosions lit up the sky. Mildred had apparently joined Walter outside, and whatever cooking supplies she'd brought were creating light shows that would have been beautiful if they weren't systematically dismantling one of the Hegemony's most advanced warships. "The thing is," Zoe added, now wearing what appeared to be military-grade tactical gear that had been sized down for someone barely tall enough to ride most amusement park attractions. We weren't expecting visitors today. This has really disrupted our lesson plan. Lesson plan, Drac whispered. Advanced Strategic Deception, Unit 12, another child supplied helpfully. Today was supposed to cover appearing helpless while maintaining tactical superiority. Your arrival provided an excellent practical examination. Drac's remaining soldiers had begun the slow process of setting down their weapons, not because they'd been ordered to, but because 30 pairs of very young, very alert eyes were studying them with the clinical interest of people conducting live dissection. "You know what the beautiful irony is?" Sam asked, settling into a chair with the relaxed posture of someone whose day had gone exactly according to plan. "You actually did identify our weakness correctly." "We did?" Drac felt a flicker of hope. "Absolutely. We are just children. We do need protection. We are vulnerable." Sam's smile was the most terrifying thing Drac had ever seen. "We just happen to be protected by the most dangerous humans alive in a facility designed by people who've spent decades thinking about exactly this scenario." Through the comm unit, they could hear Commander Thex attempting to coordinate damage control, while what sounded like elderly humans politely requested permission to help with repairs, in voices that suggested refusal wasn't really an option. "The best part," Mia observed, checking her equipment with professional thoroughness, "is that this was never actually a trap. This facility really is exactly what it appears to be. A place where human children live and learn and grow up safe. You just made one tiny miscalculation." "Which was?" Drac asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "You assumed safe meant defenseless," Walter said, reappearing in the doorway. His gardening clothes were gone, replaced by tactical gear that had seen serious use. "Classic mistake. Humans don't create safety by removing threats. We create safety by making sure the threats regret their life choices." Mildred bustled in behind him, somehow managing to look both grandmotherly and terrifying, while carrying equipment that violated several interstellar weapons treaties. "The ship's crew has been very polite," she reported. "I think they're ready to discuss terms." "Terms?" Drac asked weakly. "Oh yes," Sam said brightly. "See, you've provided us with excellent training data, but now we have a logistics problem. We can't exactly let you leave and report back about our capabilities. But we're not unreasonable people." Outside, the Eternal Dominion was now decorated with enough explosive charges to turn it into the galaxy's most expensive fireworks display. The fact that they'd been placed there by humans old enough to qualify for senior citizen discounts somehow made it worse. "So here's what's going to happen," Sam continued, with the patient tone of someone explaining simple concepts to slow students. "You're going to send a message back to Hegemony Command. You're going to tell them that you encountered a standard human child care facility, found it adequately defended by appropriate security measures, and decided that human children weren't worth the trouble." "That's it?" Drac couldn't believe it was that simple. "That's it," Sam confirmed. "We get to keep our quiet little facility. You get to keep breathing. And the Hegemony learns a valuable lesson about making assumptions." His expression grew thoughtful. "Plus, we'll have excellent footage for next semester's Why Intelligence Gathering Matters class." Drac looked around the room, at children who'd just dismantled a military operation with the casual efficiency of people discussing the weather, at elderly humans who'd turned ship-to-ship combat into a recreational activity, and at a facility that had managed to be exactly what it claimed, while simultaneously being the most dangerous place he'd ever encountered. "And if we refuse?" he asked, though it was more curiosity than defiance. 30 children and 2 senior citizens looked at him with expressions of polite interest, as if he'd asked whether they preferred vanilla or chocolate ice cream. The kind of look that suggested both options were available, but one would be significantly more pleasant than the other. "Well," Mia said thoughtfully, "Grandma Mildred hasn't had a chance to show off her advanced baking techniques in ages. I'm sure she'd love the opportunity." Through the windows they could see Mildred's baking supplies continuing to redecorate the Eternal Dominion in patterns that strongly suggested artistic talent, combined with extensive demolitions training. Drac reached for his comm unit with the careful movements of someone who'd just learned that sometimes the smart move was knowing when you were completely outmatched. "Commander Thex," he said slowly, "recommend immediate withdrawal. Target assessment complete. Suggest we find a different objective." "Copy that," came the relieved response. "What's your status on the ground?" Drac looked around one more time, at the finger paintings still drying on easels, at the stuffed animals scattered on nap-time beds, at children who were somehow both exactly what they appeared to be and absolutely nothing like what anyone expected. "All quiet," he reported. "Just a bunch of kids and their grandparents. Nothing to worry about here." And as his team prepared for extraction, leaving behind a facility full of children who waved goodbye, with the same cheerful enthusiasm they'd shown when finger painting, Drac couldn't help thinking that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy would be a much safer place if everyone learned this particular lesson about human child rearing. After all, when your toddlers are tactical prodigies and your senior citizens are retired special forces, the phrase harmless human civilians takes on an entirely different meaning. The kind of meaning that made even the Hegemony decide that perhaps some sleeping cubs were better left undisturbed.